All right. Okay, we're going to do this. Hi. This is the mop-up for July 22nd, 2024. I'm David Feldman in New York City. Thank you so much for finding me. Had Joe Biden stayed in the race, Democrats could have turned his perceived weakness into a strength. Vote Joe's heart, not his tongue. They could have said, vote Joe's mind, not his mouth. Yes, sometimes he forgets people's names. Who doesn't? Joke about it. Trivialize it. Joe was starting to do that. They could have leaned into Joe not being slick, not being well packaged. Lean into that and say, judge Joe Biden by what he does, not by what he says or how he says it. Republicans did that successfully with Ronald Reagan and George W. Bush. The Democrats could have won in November by placing Joe Biden in protective bubble wrap. I am being serious about this. They could have protected Joe Biden by attacking the media for focusing only on his verbal misfires instead of on Donald Trump's gusher of lies and threats to the rule of law. The Democrats should have said after the last debate, no more debates. The media cannot be trusted to do their job to correct Donald Trump's falsehoods. That's what the Democrats should have said. That's what Joe Biden's campaign should have said. That's what Joe should have said. Right after Joe Biden's piss-poor performance, the Democratic attack machine should have lit up Jake Tapper, Dana Bash, and CNN for not fact-checking Donald Trump. That's how you win elections. You attack Trump and you put the media on defense. Instead, Biden and the Democrats owned his bad debate performance. And that doesn't work against Donald Trump. You can't give this monster an inch. He is an inveterate liar. That should have been the only talking point after that debate. Because Americans didn't watch. Something like 50 million people barely saw the debate. And Joe Biden picked up independent voters right after the debate. In the immediate aftermath of the CNN debate, Joe lost 1 or 2 points in most polls. He moved ahead in others. But it was the media and his own Democratic Party that doused him in gasoline, then lit the match. After that debate, you work the refs the same way Trump does. It should have been CNN, Jake Tapper, and Dana Bash admitting they screwed up, not Joe Biden. It's not his job to plug a Hoover Dam-sized burst of lies. After Trump won in 2016, CNN did some soul searching, and they promised never to commit the same mistakes they made in 2016 that got Donald Trump elected. So instead, now they're making brand new mistakes, all in the name of commerce. CNN is struggling in the ratings. CNN desperately needed Trump more than he needed them. He agreed to enter what he called enemy territory, CNN, so long as nobody at CNN corrected him. Apparently, that was the deal. A deal that was nothing short of journalistic malfeasance. And after that debate, all anyone on our side should have been allowed to say was, Trump's a liar, and CNN is obviously in the pocket of Donald Trump and the Republicans. And that is all that should have been said. There should have been disciplined messaging coming out of the Democratic Party. Now, I know the ground rules for the debate included no fact-checking. We know the only way CNN could get Trump to agree to the debate on CNN was no fact-checking. I've also heard Biden agree to that, to which I say, who cares? It doesn't matter what the ground rules were. The Democrats, especially the Biden campaign, should have immediately said after that debate, there is fact-checking, and then there is calling out lies. And Donald Trump did nothing but lie. What you do after that debate is you blame CNN. But the Democrats and Joe Biden didn't do that. They folded. They folded. Biden's campaign failed him by agreeing to the terms of this debate. And then after failing to spin it properly, afterwards, they failed him again. Joe Biden still could have won in November had his party protected him. To protect Joe Biden, surrogates for Joe should have angrily demanded no more debates. The media can't be trusted. That's what a well-functioning, loyal Democratic Party does to defeat fascism. I honestly don't know if Joe Biden could have done another debate without embarrassing himself. I'll be honest with you. That's why you don't put him in any situations like that again. You put him in situations like the Howard Stern interview, which was perfect. This is an election against fascism. We're storming the beaches. We were storming the beaches with Joe Biden. And as Donald Rumsfeld said, you go to war with the army you have, not the army you wish you had. Joe Biden wasn't the best choice, but he was our only choice. The same applies to Kamala Harris. Not our best choice, but now our only choice. We'll never know if Joe Biden would have won. But there is no question that his polling began to deteriorate in the days leading up to his momentous decision on Sunday. And why did the polls deteriorate? Because the entire Democratic leadership abandoned him. How could the polls not have collapsed? It was a tidal wave of self-inflicted negativity, not just from the media, wealthy donors, but also from ambitious backstabbing and cowardly off-the-record members of his own party. I still believe Joe Biden could have won. I don't think it would have been easy. Age had caught up with him. But with a party that was loyal and grateful and willing to cover for him, he would have won. Yes, he may not be the same. And you can say that. You say Joe's not the same, but here's what is the same. He's still the most qualified American to be president. And that's actually true. Joe Biden was betrayed by wealthy donors and wobbly, ambitious, backstabbing self-dealers in his own party. Gretchen Whitmer, the governor of Michigan, wouldn't even stand on stage with Joe Biden last week when he was campaigning in her state. She was too busy. She was too busy sucking up to Silicon Valley, the media moguls, and Wall Street, who were all gathering in Sun Valley. She chose them over Joe Biden, and it's going to be really hard for me to forgive her for that. Elisa Slotkin, who is running for Senate in Michigan, also refused to stand on a stage with Joe Biden last week when he visited Michigan. Instead, she hinted he should step aside. Slotkin's polling in Michigan showed her well ahead of her Republican opponent. So it was her job to lift Joe Biden up. Instead, she cowered. A profile in courage is Senator Bob Casey, the Democratic incumbent in Pennsylvania, who stood with Joe Biden when Joe came to his state of Pennsylvania last week. Like Slotkin, Casey is way ahead. He's way ahead in Pennsylvania. And he understood his role, and that was to lift Joe up. That was the role. Not drag him down the way Slotkin in Michigan decided to do. I believe Joe Biden could have won. I think it would have been incredibly tough, not because of Trump, because of Democrats, because of the media, and the Democrats not lashing out at the media for fixating on verbal miscues coming out of Joe Biden's mouth instead of the fire hose of lies coming out of Donald Trump's. Why do I think Joe could have won? Well, there are two components to election modeling. There are the polls, and then there are the fundamentals. Polls are moved by the fundamentals. Fundamentals are the deep currents. Fundamentals are economic conditions in the key swing states. Fundamentals are, what is this election going to be about? Is it going to be about the migrants, the phony migrant crisis, or is it about abortion? If it's about abortion and not the phony migrant crisis, then Joe Biden's fundamentals are much stronger than Donald Trump's. Fundamentals are, how big are the respective candidates' war chests? What do their ad buys look like in the swing states? And most importantly, what do their ground games look like in those swing states? Like I said, fundamentals will move the polls. Fundamentals are the meat, polls are the sizzle. Joe's fundamentals were stronger than any modern American president running for re-election. In the lead up to Joe Biden stepping down, there's no question that his polling was beginning to sag. But his fundamentals remain strong, incredibly strong, until last week when the party turned on him, until the party pretty much said he's unfit for office. And let's be brutally honest here. That's exactly what the words, "I don't think Joe can beat Donald Trump," really mean. That was a euphemism for Joe's senile, which he isn't. But the American people picked up on what Joe can't beat Trump really meant. They knew what Pelosi, Obama, House Democrats, Peter Welch of Vermont were saying. When they were saying, "I don't think Joe can beat Trump," they were saying he's senile. It meant members of his own party doubted his mental acuity and found him unfit for office. How dare they? Joe Biden could have survived Trump's attacks on his age, but never his own party's. I'm voting for Harris, but this was disgraceful. Had the Democratic Party lifted Joe up after the debate, he'd be doing just fine or better in the polls. Instead, it was his own party leaking to the media that created doubt about Joe Biden's mental acuity. George Clooney, Congressman Seth Moulton of Massachusetts, and dozens of others either said openly or leaked cowardly that Joe was pretty much senile. Massachusetts Congressman Seth Moulton said last week, "I recently appeared at a fundraiser and it seemed like Joe couldn't remember who I was," which raises two questions. One, how could anyone forget Congressman Seth Moulton? And two, who the hell is Seth Moulton? Why should Joe Biden be expected to remember this meaningless prick, this blue dog conservative out of Massachusetts, Seth Moulton? He's the president of the United States. There are 435 members of Congress. He's supposed to remember Seth Moulton? But the narrative became Joe's old, and the media picked up on it. It was the donors, self-dealing Democrats, and of course the media, not the voters, who decided Joe Biden is senile. I don't care, and the voters don't care, that he couldn't remember the name of his defense secretary, or that in conversation he trails off. You know what you do? You say, "Oh, that's Joe." And then you fight for him. Because this isn't about Joe Biden, it's about us, our party, the Democrats. The question is the party going to fight for the voters? And if they're not going to fight for Joe Biden, then there's a hard case to make that members of the Democratic Party are going to fight for anyone other than themselves. I am disgusted by this. Disgusted. I will vote for Harris. I hope Seth Moulton gets reelected. I hope Elise Slotkin gets reelected. I hope Adam Schiff gets elected in California. But they disgust me. They disgust me. The reason I remained a cheerleader for Biden, the reason I say it was a mistake to push him out, is because his fundamentals were the strongest of any candidate in recent memory. His fundamentals had one weakness: messaging. Messaging. Joe Biden was always weak and getting weaker when it came to messaging. There's no question he's gotten old. But had the party united around him, he could have been lifted up instead of kicked to the side. That's what we are supposed to do as Democrats. Take care of one another. Voters get that. They're forgiving, especially when the party is behind their candidate. When the party supports its own candidate, voters respond to that. I'll talk more about this later. I'm angry at the people who kicked Joe Biden to the curb. I'm voting for Harris. I will fight for Harris. I'm disappointed. So, except for the fact that members of his own party had questioned his mental acuity last week, Joe had incredibly strong fundamentals that would have moved the polls after Labor Day. Here's why. This election is about abortion, not the migrants. Big fundamental advantage for Joe Biden. Record low unemployment in key battleground states. Record low for the longest stretch of time. COVID, no longer an emergency. An incredibly large war chest that was getting even larger until the donor class turned off the spigot last week and withheld $90 million. Thank you, Abigail Disney, James Carville, and George Clooney. Make no mistake, it was the donor class who pulled the plug on Joe Biden. No money? Well, that chips away at your fundamentals. But Joe Biden had an incredibly powerful ground game. Trump's ground game doesn't compare to Joe Biden's. The Wall Street Journal reported over the weekend that Biden had at least 50 campaign offices in Wisconsin alone, whereas Trump's campaign spending money in Wisconsin, wasting money in Wisconsin, but so far, no sign of any get out the vote apparatus. You don't win elections by tacking to the wins. You don't win by reading polls. You win with a ground game, specifically in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. That was all that mattered, the ground game. The ground game. All 3 states have Democratic governors. 2 of those states had loyal Democratic governors who campaigned with Joe in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. Gretchen Whitmer, the governor of Michigan, did not. You might remember right after the debate, Politico reported that Gretchen Whitmer said, "Well, that's it, Joe just lost Michigan." Politico quoted Gretchen Whitmer right after the debate saying, "I won't run instead of him, but he just lost Michigan." Well, the next day, she immediately walked that back. She said, "I don't know why Politico reported that." And I immediately defended her and said Politico got it wrong. Well, I take it back. I think Politico got it exactly right. I think Whitmer is lying. I think she said it. I think she gave up on Joe during the debate, if not before the debate. And she helped push him out by telling Politico he just lost Michigan. There is no question that Joe Biden's numbers started to deteriorate last week, but the fundamentals were always there. All Joe Biden needed was Democrats to message for, not against him. Pelosi, Adam Schiff, and Barack Obama all quietly worked against him because they are all beholden to the donor class. And it was the donor class that had a problem with Joe Biden. Joe Biden's agenda has turned out to become surprisingly progressive. Not progressive enough for me or my listeners, but certainly more progressive than the old guard paid for when they placed their thumbs on the scale back in 2020 and crowned him as the nominee. There is no question that going into November, Joe had a winning populist message to counteract Trump's phony populist message. Granted, in certain venues, he was unable to deliver that message. His voice had become weak. He stumbled over words. He needed surrogates, but instead, the people who should have been his surrogates smelled weakness, opportunity, and abandoned him. Joe Biden couldn't move the polls in his direction when Obama and the entire Democratic leadership, as well as the entire news media, chose to hammer on Joe's age instead of Trump's lies. A lot of what Biden has been talking about this year caters to the progressive wing of the party. Forgiving medical debt. He just proposed national rent control. He repeatedly promised not to renew Trump's tax cuts for the richest 1%. He is running rhetorically against the ruling class by saying they have to pay their fair share. And rhetorically, he's pro-union. Granted, most of what he's saying is cosmetic. I get that. He's trying to out-populist Trump and J.D. Vance. But he's saying things and doing things that threaten the wealthy donors who make up the Democratic Party. There's a reason Joe Biden's strongest supporters right before dropping out were Bernie Sanders, AOC, the Squad, Black and Hispanic Democrats. We know nobody was going to move Joe Biden to the left, but progressives pushed him into policy that had a much stronger whiff of progressive politics than anything Barack Obama, Nancy Pelosi, or Bill Clinton had or was willing to offer. He was strong on abortion, strong on taking on gun manufacturers. Right after Trump got shot, Biden doubled down on an assault weapons ban. Pitch perfect. Yes, he was mediocre on climate change and foreign policy, but far better than anything Donald Trump had to offer. An argument could be made, vis-a-vis the donor class, that Biden, like Willie Stark and Robert Penn Warren's All the King's Men, turned on the people who brung him to the dance. Or at least he was perceived to have turned on them. The wealthy Hollywood donors, the wealthy Silicon Valley donors who give to the Democratic Party, they do not like paying more in taxes. They loathe unions. And they detest Lena Khan, who runs the Federal Trade Commission, which is trying to break up monopolies. Biden is trying to rein in cryptocurrencies, artificial intelligence, TikTok, and social media. He is running on the side of labor, not workers, labor. And there's a difference. Labor means unions. Hollywood donors to the Democratic Party oppose labor. They don't want artificial intelligence reined in. Hollywood is owned by Silicon Valley, like Netflix and Apple. Those are Silicon Valley companies. Hollywood is also owned by Wall Street. They don't appreciate any of Joe Biden's progressive policies. And of course, the biggest slap in the face to wealthy Democratic donors was Joe Biden promising not to renew Trump's tax cuts for the rich, which are scheduled to expire next year. Trump has promised to deepen those tax cuts. Biden has promised to get rid of them. Now, I am voting for Kamala Harris. Tomorrow, I will love her. I will get in line and get in love. I will fall in line and fall in love. But now, today, now that she is the nominee, will she turn away from the donors who brung her to the dance? Or did Hollywood, Wall Street, and Silicon Valley on Sunday teach her a valuable lesson about what happens to presidents when they even think about working for anyone other than the ruling class? I believe Joe Biden was ordered to stand down, not because he was too old, but because he had become too progressive. So, is Kamala going to do what the donors tell her to do? Is she quietly making the same promises Trump made by choosing J.D. Vance, a private equity manager with deep ties to Silicon Valley and Wall Street? I'm not naive to suggest that Joe Biden is a progressive. He does spend every Thanksgiving with the odious David Rubenstein, the war profiteer who founded the Carlyle Group, which lately has been buying up nursing homes around the country. And then in order to turn a profit, David Rubenstein and the Carlyle Group kills your grandmother and grandfather by firing staff and cutting back unnecessary equipment. But why shouldn't a war profiteer turn to nursing homes and start killing Americans the way David Rubenstein, the founder of the Carlyle Group, does? And he's got his own show on the PBS, and you can't do anything at the Kennedy Center without David Rubenstein butting in, and he hands out the Mark Twain Award. This is a genuine POS. I think he also owns Dunkin' Donuts. Carlyle Group. Joe Biden, every Thanksgiving, in David Rubenstein's home. So I understand who Joe Biden is. Joe Biden wasn't a progressive. But at 81, you got a sense that he was beginning to know right from wrong. Bernie Sanders, who does know right from wrong, on Sunday called Joe Biden the most pro-working class president in modern American history. Bernie issued the statement after Joe Biden dropped out of the race on Sunday. Biden, right after dropping out, immediately endorsed his vice president, Kamala Harris, to take his place. It looks like it's Harris. So, time for Donald Trump to dust off all those old birtherism tweets. Vice President Harris running for president. Cue the women-hating bigots in the Beltway who say, oh, don't get me wrong, I like Harris. I'm just worried maybe she's too young. So, Biden out, Harris in. That's okay. I'm sure the wealthy donors running the Democratic Party know what's best for us. They're always looking out for us. Vice President Harris currently sits with an approval rating of 39%, identical to Joe Biden's approval rating. That's according to 538's national averages. But she is going to be the nominee, and she's all that stands right now between the Oval Office and Donald Trump. I'm falling in line. I'm falling in love. Till the bitter end, Bernie, AOC, and members of the Congressional Black Caucus urged Joe Biden to stay in the race. So far, Bernie Sanders has yet to endorse Harris. But AOC, who like Bernie urged Biden to stay in the race, immediately endorsed Harris, as did the Congressional Black Caucus and the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. That all happened on Sunday. It moved very quickly on Sunday. The chairwoman of the Progressive Caucus, House Democrat from Washington, Pramila Jayapal, immediately endorsed Harris, as did Wisconsin Democrat Senator Tammy Baldwin, who is running for re-election. Wisconsin, as you know, is a key swing state, a must-win for Biden, now Harris. And most polling showed the race between Trump and Biden in Wisconsin to be a dead heat, sometimes with Biden leading slightly. Meanwhile, Wisconsin Democratic Senator Tammy Baldwin is the clear favorite to win her re-election bid, as are all the Democratic Senate candidates in the key swing states. None of them were being dragged down by Biden's sagging poll numbers. None of them. Jon Tester in Montana is running a tough race, but that's not a swing state. Sherrod Brown in Ohio, leading Moreno by as much as 11 points. Ohio, not a swing state. Biden not dragging anybody down. Nobody who's running for re-election in a key swing state was being dragged down by Joe Biden because it was their job to lift him up. I suspect it will be a matter of hours until the entire Democratic Party gets behind Harris. This will be a coronation, and that's a good thing. There's no time for anything else. You know, I said, how are we going to do this? Joe Biden steps aside. I said it has to be Harris then. You can't have an open convention. You can't have these mini primaries. It has to be Harris, and the Democratic Party is marching in lockstep. California Governor Gavin Newsom and Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro late Sunday endorsed Harris. The two governors were considered by many as her likely challengers if Joe Biden stepped aside. That's not going to happen. Gretchen Whitmer, the governor of Michigan, also named as a possible replacement for Joe Biden, is reportedly prepared to endorse Harris. I mean, she had such a nice visit last week in Sun Valley with all the donors. She just wants to make sure she's checked all her options first. But she's reportedly prepared to endorse Harris. That's according to new reporting this morning in the Financial Times. By the time you hear this, Gretchen Whitmer probably will have already endorsed Harris. No word yet from billionaire Democratic Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, who was also considered for the top of the ticket. He will play host to the Democratic convention in August. He's been holding out. Of the four likely challengers to Harris, so far it looks like J.B. Pritzker hasn't endorsed Harris yet. He will. Everybody's getting in line. The Financial Times reports this morning that Harris has already begun vetting vice presidents, and topping her list are Democratic Governor of Kentucky, Andy Beshear, and Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro. Not mentioned for her short list is Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, who endorsed Harris on Sunday. Now, you might remember last week I suggested a Harris-Buttigieg ticket, but I'm beginning to see that only appeals to Washington insiders. Buttigieg would bring nothing to the ticket. He was the mayor of South Bend, Indiana. Then he ran for president in 2020 and narrowly won Iowa. He barely beat Bernie in Iowa. But if you put him on the ticket as vice president, he's not going to deliver Iowa, and he's certainly not going to deliver Indiana. Iowa and Indiana, two states that remain stubbornly red. So I don't believe Pete Buttigieg brings anything to the ticket. He's kind of too much like Kamala Harris. West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin, who quit the Democratic Party this year and the Senate, now hinting that he may rejoin the Democratic Party to run for the nomination in Chicago as part of the Problem Creators Caucus. You're not a problem solver. You call yourself you're the Problem Creators Caucus. Seriously, Joe Manchin hinting at a run for the Democratic presidential nomination because America thirsts for Manchin's West Virginia miracle. What is the West Virginia miracle? The miracle is West Virginia is markedly worse off since voters sent Joe Manchin to Washington, D.C., and yet they reelected him twice. That's the West Virginia miracle. The West Virginia miracle is that Joe Manchin's daughter wasn't locked up for price fixing. She ran a drug company and was price fixing the EpiPen. That's the West Virginia miracle. Go away, Joe Manchin. Go away. Marianne Williamson, who ran for the Democratic nomination this year and eventually suspended her campaign, announced she will now once again seek the nomination. Good luck with that. The Democratic governor of North Carolina, Roy Cooper, who some say might have put North Carolina's 16 electoral votes further into play had he topped the ticket, well, he immediately endorsed Harris, possible running mate. North Carolina was in play until the Democrats turned on Joe Biden. Former President Bill Clinton and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton also immediately endorsed Harris. There are reports that the Clintons, up until the 11th hour, were trying to convince Joe Biden to stay in the race. And Bill and Hillary were working the phones feverishly, trying to jumpstart his donor base. New York State Attorney General Letitia James, who beat Donald Trump and the National Rifle Association in 2 massive civil fraud trials this year, announced that she and 5 other black attorneys general from Massachusetts, Minnesota, Nevada, Illinois, and Maryland were all officially endorsing Vice President Harris for president. Obama, on the other hand, in the days leading up to Joe Biden's decision to drop out, Obama is said to have quietly expressed concern about Biden's fitness for office. You won't find any paper trail. You will find nobody saying Obama was openly urging colleagues to push Biden out. But it's what Obama didn't say that led so many Democrats to believe he had deep concern about Joe Biden's age, fitness for office, and ability to beat Trump. And Obama clearly wanted Joe Biden off the ticket. There has always been strained relations between Obama and Biden. Biden felt disrespected, not necessarily by Obama, but certainly by Obama White House staffers with their blue chip educations. The rap against Joe Biden in the Obama White House was Joe tended to be a little too chatty. He spoke too much and often let too many things slip. It's precisely why Obama urged Hillary to run in 2016 and not Biden. Of course, a deal was made in 2008 between Obama and the Clintons that he would endorse her in 2016 and not Biden. Immediately after Biden withdrew, Obama said, quote, "I have extraordinary confidence that the leaders of our party will be able to create a process from which an outstanding nominee emerges." He did not endorse Harris. He will. I'll explain to you why he didn't, but he will. The official stance from the Democratic Party, what's going on here? The official stance from the Democratic Party leadership is this will be an open convention and anyone who wants to try for the nomination is welcome. Former Speaker Pelosi and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, as well as Obama, are refusing to endorse any candidate. So they don't want to be perceived as discouraging anyone from challenging Harris. The same applies to House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, who praised Joe Biden, called his decision to step aside a heroic act. He, too, did not endorse Harris. Since Joe Biden's poor debate performance, excuse me, let me just have, how are we doing on time here? Okay. Since Joe Biden's debate performance, Jeffrey listened to members of the House. They expressed their doubts about Joe Biden and their concerns he would keep Democrats from winning back control of the House. But Jeffrey he stood firm, and he insisted as recently as Friday night that the Biden-Harris ticket was a winning combination. Okay, there is a very good reason, a smart reason, that Obama, Schumer, Pelosi, and Jeffries are remaining silent and not endorsing Harris. They will remain silent for at least the rest of today because it would be a bad look for Harris. It wouldn't feel right should the entire Democratic leadership automatically turn the Chicago Convention into her coronation, which it's going to be anyway. What is surprising is how quickly the Democrats went from complete disarray after the debate into marching in lockstep immediately behind Harris on Sunday. By the end of today, Democrats will fall in line and fall in love because the pro-choice party is left with no choice. It is Harris. By remaining silent today, by not endorsing Harris, Pelosi, Jeffries, Schumer, and Obama give the impression that she won the nomination fair and square and that she's not being forced on the party. You know, the way Biden was forced on the party back in 2020 when it looked like Bernie Sanders was going to win the nomination. Joe Biden didn't go through the proper filtration process in 2020. He was behind Bernie. He was behind Elizabeth Warren, and he was behind Pete Buttigieg going into South Carolina. Then the perfect confluence of COVID in March and then the threat of Bernie winning the nomination forced the Democratic leadership to step up, get Buttigieg and Warren to step aside, and turn 2020 into a race between Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden. This year, Harris, well, she earned the vice presidency. She was elected. She served 3.5 years under Joe Biden. It's her turn. Nobody is putting the thumb on the scale for her. This presidential nomination, for better or worse, belongs to her. Everyone knows it. But the leadership can't make it look like they're forcing her on the delegates. The Associated Press reports that Harris has a distinct advantage over any other Democratic challengers because as the number 2 on the ticket, according to federal election rules, she is able to immediately tap into Joe Biden's campaign war chest, which right now approaches $100 million. There are reports that after Biden withdrew on Sunday and she declared, the Democrats had their biggest fundraising day in history, with Act Blue saying Harris raised more than $30 million on Sunday within the first 6 hours of her announcement. The Financial Times reports this morning that Donald Trump outraised Joe Biden by about $100 million in the second quarter of the year, boosted by his May 30th conviction in Manhattan. The second quarter ends June 1st, and he got convicted on May 30th, and in the lead up to that conviction, he was playing the martyr. Republicans, small donor and big donor Republicans, started contributing. That being said, after the debate, June 27th, Biden set a record for fundraising. The day after the June 27th debate, Joe Biden set a record for the Democrats in fundraising. Look, Harris isn't my first choice, but Joe Biden wasn't my first choice either, and she must win. On paper, Harris should beat Donald Trump. But then again, on paper, Hillary should have beaten Donald Trump. As you know, this election comes down to voters in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. Trump last week doubled down on aggrieved white working class men by picking J.D. Vance, who says he doesn't believe in a woman's right to an abortion, even in the case of rape and incest. Now, conventional wisdom was this election would be decided by suburban women in the swing states, specifically black suburban women. On paper, Kamala Harris reads like the perfect candidate to beat Donald Trump. I hope so. But right now, her approval rating is identical to Joe Biden's. It sits at 39%. She polls slightly better than Joe Biden does in a new head-to-head matchup with Donald Trump. This is a new CBS YouGov poll showing Kamala Harris only losing to Donald Trump by 3 percentage points, whereas Joe Biden loses to Trump by 5 percentage points in the same poll. I like to think the Democrats are going to fall in line and in love with her, and that will create a halo effect, which would then suggest to voters she can govern. Poll numbers go up, and elections can be won when voters get a sense that the party lifts up its candidate. Now, I really like Joe Biden. My sister cried today. He grew on us. It was sad to see him forced to step down. I anticipate a convention in Chicago that serves as a love letter to Joe Biden, and deservedly so. Speaker after speaker will sing his praises, and I suspect he will deliver a valedictory that will make us weep. More importantly, I suspect the Democratic Party's ability to pivot so quickly and rise from this disorder we've been seeped in since the debate, self-inflicted. Nevertheless, I suspect the fact that in less than a month after the debate, they were able to get a new candidate. I suspect, I hope, this will remind most voters that Democrats actually know how to govern. They can govern themselves. Democrats do, compared to Republicans, Democrats know how to govern. Granted, it's a party of self-serving, ambitious pricks, but in the end, compared to Republicans, they know how to govern. I suspect watching the Chicago convention, voters will compare the Democrats getting their house in order to our Republican-controlled House of Representatives, the most ineffective Congress in American history. Voters will see a Democratic Party that didn't need a tyrant like Donald Trump to snap them into shape. They made a mess, but they got it together without resorting to fascism, whereas the Republican Party has made a mess And the only person who can bring them all together is a mob boss, Donald Trump. We are seeing a peaceful transfer of power within the Democratic Party, where Biden is handing it over to Harris. And I believe the American people don't want a show. They're tired of all the chaos, and a peaceful transfer of power from Biden to Harris within the Democratic Party will remind voters that the government will be in better hands with Harris and the Democrats in charge than Trump and the Republicans. Voters will be reminded that this is a choice between competence and kleptocracy, a choice between competence and chaos. As much as it saddens me to see Joe Biden tossed aside. Politically speaking, I have to believe now this will work for the Democratic Party. I have to believe it's time to make way for someone younger, because I have no choice. He's out. I am accepting the reality, so I have to believe this is a good thing. Voters, unfortunately, are sick of Biden, and fortunately, they're sick of Trump. We know this overwhelmingly. All the polls show that voters wish both parties had someone else on the ticket. Well, Democrats are giving voters what they asked for. Someone new. In America, new is perceived as better. I like to think most voters are tired of Trump, and they're tired of Trump bashing Biden. I'd like to think Harris will feel like something new. That's what I'm hoping. Trump isn't fun or funny anymore to voters. And I hope and I suspect by putting Harris at the top of the ticket, voters will feel like they've been finally freed from the gerontocracy controlling Washington. All that being said, there is the distinct possibility that the American voter is just as racist and misogynistic as Republicans give them credit for. California Senator, Democrat LaFonza Butler, a black woman, she expressed concern yesterday that maybe America isn't ready to elect a black woman as president. But I like to think all the racists, all the misogynists are already baked into Donald Trump's base. I like to think there's a ceiling there, and we've found it. I like to think most people are already voting for Donald Trump specifically because they hate women, they hate people of color, and they hate women of color. I like to think new people, new voters, independents, aren't suddenly going to get off the couch and decide to vote in this election for Trump because a black woman is running against him. To put it another way, Trump's base is already a roach motel of racist, misogynistic lowlifes, and there's no longer any room at the inn. All sold out. The Roach Motel, no room. Winning this election isn't going to be easier with Harris on the ticket. It could be more difficult, but I get the sense that Democrats will work harder for her than they were willing to work for Joe Biden. I don't think they're going to sabotage her the way they sabotaged Joe Biden. But it will not be an easy election. She is married to Doug Emhoff, a corporate lawyer who put his career on hold to support his wife. Now, if you're courting young voters, female voters, you can't find a better role model than Doug Emhoff and this marriage. But of course, they'll try to destroy Doug Emhoff. They will portray Emhoff as a cuck or a beta male. And with a little more than 100 days left in this race, the GOP, I can assure you, will invent phony paper trails showing how Doug Emhoff got rich off of his wife's political career. There'll be counterfeit paper trails. He is a corporate lawyer, and sadly, all corporate lawyers do something dirty or immoral. It goes with the territory. Trump will find a shred of dirt on Doug Emhoff and turn it into a never-ending, cascading mudslide. It will be a miracle if Doug Emhoff survives this race. I wouldn't be surprised if he announces he has to step aside as candidate for first husband. I can imagine him saying something along the lines like, I will not serve as first husband if my wife is elected. Look what they did to Hunter. Look what they did to Hillary when Bill was running for president. Hillary was a corporate lawyer. Remember the Rose law firm billing records? Nothing needs to be true. You just make up crap. So, what do I think went down during the past 10 days that led up to Biden deciding to step aside? And what does it say about Harris's chances? Now, I'm going to present two scenarios. One suggests that Harris is going to win. One suggests she's going to have trouble. But let me first remind you, you're listening to The Mop-Up. I'm David Feldman in New York City. Thank you for finding me. If you enjoy any of this, please hit the like button so I remain in your feed. And most importantly, share this episode. I had we're live, but we had a problem going live this morning. So I don't know how many people are going to be able to see this live. So if you could share this episode, do me a favor, because I don't think it's being sent out to all my listeners, if you could do that. And if you would like a transcript of today's show, go to shopdavidfeldman.com and you can get a free transcript, all made possible by the listeners who buy the garbage over at shopdavidfeldman.com. Okay, two scenarios. I'm hypothesizing here. One will make me feel sanguine, is that the word, about Kamala's chances. One, not so sanguine. I don't know if I'm using the word sanguine properly, but I think I'm pronouncing Kamala's name properly. I better learn how to pronounce your name. I have a little, as you know, some things I have a little learning disability. Okay. So, Let me know in the comments section. I read all your comments, by the way. Okay, how are we doing on time here? Let's keep moving. Okay, here's the best case scenario that suggests everything's going to be fine for the Democrats. Best case scenario leading up to Sunday is that Biden didn't want to give up power. I'm hoping, best case scenario, he felt abandoned by the Democrats and was screaming that Harris was a backstabber. This is best case. And he's saying to Jill, you can't trust anybody. Best case scenario is Joe Biden threw a tantrum, screamed, I won the nomination. It's my party, not Obama's, not Pelosi's, not Harris's. It's mine and all mine. Best case scenario is he genuinely believed, as did I, that he would win. And he had a nasty chip on his shoulder because once again, Obama and Pelosi and the Democratic leadership were all underestimating him. Best case scenario, he didn't want to step down because he said, I'll show them. And then he saw polls that I didn't see. Bad polling. And suddenly he no longer saw a road to 270, and he realized Schumer, Pelosi, Obama were right. He was crippling down ballot candidates. He was going to lose. That's the best case scenario. Step off the stage, turn the convention in Chicago as this gigantic love letter to Joe Biden. That's the best case scenario, and that suggests Kamala Harris is a very strong candidate. That's the good case scenario. Now let me give you a worse case scenario. This is what keeps me up at night. This and generalized anxiety mixed with 6 cups of coffee a day. That's also what keeps me up. Okay, this is what I'm worried about. I worry that when they came to Biden and told him, you got to step down, Biden said, if I go away, you do realize it's got to be Harris. It will be nobody will accept anybody but Harris to top the ticket. And then he said, but I know for a fact she can't win. Worst case scenario, he said, trust me, I vetted her for vice president, and I've seen everything. She can't win. I've seen all the Oppo research. She can't win. I've seen the polling. She can't win. I've come to understand her management skills, her people skills. Trust me, she can't win. That's the worst case scenario, where Biden was reluctant to step aside because he purposely, as presidents do, picked a flawed vice president who, for innumerable reasons, can't replace him or win. It's rare when a vice president wins the presidency after serving a president. It's rare. Nixon did it, but he had to wait 8 years. Biden did it, but he had to wait 4 years. Presidential candidates historically pick vice presidents who are no threat to them politically. It's why Obama picked Joe Biden. It's why McCain picked Sarah Palin. It's why George W. Bush picked Dick Cheney. And it's why George W. Bush's dad picked Dan Quayle. Presidential candidates pick vice presidents who they perceive as no threat to them politically. So my doomsday scenario is there may be, this is the scenario, there may be something in Kamala's past or her polling or her people skills that made Joe Biden comfortable enough around her to pick her as his vice president. Something that assured him she was no threat. Remember, she never made it out of the gate in 2020. She didn't even make it to 2020. She dropped out in 2019 before Iowa. Buttigieg won Iowa. Worst case scenario, Joe Biden truly believes Trump would mop the floor with Harris. And that's one of the reasons why he refused to step aside for so long. I don't believe that. I'm just throwing it out. It may be 10% true. I think there's like a 10% truth to that. At least that Biden thought she was no threat to him politically. The New York Times reported 10 days ago that the Trump campaign was already planning their line of attack against Harris, all based on the assumption that Joe Biden was going to step down and she would be the likely nominee. So, where are her vulnerabilities? If you remember early on in his presidency, Joe Biden put Harris in charge of the immigration surge at the border. This was 2021, his first year in office. And she famously earned the ire of AOC by warning Guatemalan migrants, quote, "Do not come. Do not come." She added, "If you come to our border, you will be turned back." That was difficult. She also warned the migrants, and this didn't get reported, she also warned the migrants the journey is dangerous and you would be at the mercy of vicious human smugglers. Nobody remembers that part. I mean, that was a responsible thing to say. Trump is going to seize on her being put in charge of the border. And he's already calling her Biden's border czar. And the plan now is for him to force her to defend the Biden administration's border policy, which, by the way, is now seeing dramatic success. But in a debate, the moderators wouldn't dare correct him on that. The Times also reported that the Trump campaign is about to spend close to $5 million on advertising in swing states, advertising that accuses Harris of being part of the big cover-up. And what is the big cover-up? They're accusing her of knowing that Biden's mental decline had gotten worse, and she was in on the big lie, hiding his infirmity from the American voters like she was Edith Wilson. The ad also states that because Biden was mentally incapacitated, she was running the Oval Office, serving as the de facto commander-in-chief. And so she is responsible for the border invasion, runaway inflation, and the death of the American dream, unquote. So, most people know, most voters know, that's garbage. She was not the de facto commander-in-chief. She was barely in the loop, from what most of us have heard. She wasn't running the show, and everybody knows that. If Trump is going to run against her on the border, blame her for the border, he loses. If he's going to run against her on inflation, he loses. Inflation is down to 3%. And he's not going to win if he runs on the idea that Biden, along with Harris, killed the American dream. The numbers, the fundamentals say otherwise. The problem for Trump is that Harris is a prosecutor. She will not only be able to defend the Biden administration, she will do a pretty excruciating job putting the Trump presidency on trial. This election, with Joe Biden now gone, will no longer be about Hunter Biden or Biden's alleged infirmities. It will be about Donald Trump. Donald Trump now has to defend the indefensible, his record as president. And because she is a woman of color, she will get under his skin. Meanwhile, Donald Trump and the Republican Party are already planning lawsuits challenging the transfer of Biden's campaign war chest over to the Harris campaign. Trump's lawyers insist that election law mandates all of Joe Biden's donations must now be spent on Donald's legal fees and Melania's stylist. You know, they talk about lawfare. Trump talks about lawfare. Nobody has benefited more from lawsuits this year than Donald Trump. He's going to sue so that Harris can't get Biden's money. Trump's number one charge against Harris, however, will be she is part of the quote-unquote radical left. That's because Harris is from San Francisco and served as DA in San Francisco. So you could only assume she is going to be linked to quote-unquote crazy Nancy Pelosi. I don't know if that's a winning message, but Republicans try to score cheap political points by running against San Francisco and how that city has been overrun by gangs because it's been mismanaged by Nancy Pelosi's radical left political machine. Nancy Pelosi is a congresswoman who represents parts of San Francisco. Yes, she is part of that machine. The fact that Harris, excuse me, I have been talking. Okay, just needs a little more coffee. It is coffee. The fact that Harris was a maliciously cruel district attorney in San Francisco who locked up the parents of children who didn't go to school, that will have no effect on Trump's attacks on her. She was not a liberal DA. He will blame imaginary crime statistics in San Francisco on her. We will be flooded with images of homeless people shooting up in the streets, and Harris will be blamed. This is what the radical left gave San Francisco. Do you want this for the rest of the country? She is not part of the radical. I wish she were part of the radical left. But because Trump's idiot base, all they see is a woman of color, so they automatically assume she's part of the radical left because all women of color are part of the radical left. The Republicans will portray San Francisco as a failed state. They will blame it all on Harris and the San Francisco political machine that produced her. I believe she will survive all of that garbage. What she will have some trouble surviving is the phony dirt thrown her way. And it's going to start later today. I know a little something about Willie Brown, the mayor of San Francisco. I lived in San Francisco for 12 years. I did work for Willie Brown. I love Willie Brown. He was great to me. One of the greatest politicians in American history. He was the mayor of San Francisco, and he was also the longest-serving speaker of the California Assembly, and the most successful black politician in American history until Jesse Jackson. Till Jesse Jackson ran for president in 1984, no black politician had earned as many votes, accumulated as many votes as Willie Brown had over his storied career as Speaker of the California Assembly. Jesse Jackson in '84, because he was running a national campaign, surpassed Willie Brown. But up until '84, if you added up all the votes that Willie Brown had collected running for assembly every 2 years, it added up to more votes than any other black politician in American history. Kamala was his protege. And Republicans, of course, now suggest they dated, because Republicans can't imagine that a man might guide a woman's career without any sex involved. Maybe they dated. I don't care. Since Willie Brown first stepped on the scene, he has touched the line of financial impropriety but never crossed it. He has always known how to court wealthy donors, tobacco, oil, and liquor lobbyists without ever breaking the law. He drove too fast. When he was commuting from San Francisco to Sacramento, he drove too fast. But he never broke the law, except when he drove too fast. Republicans in California for decades tried to find dirt on Willie Brown. He invited them. He tempted them. They couldn't find anything on Willie Brown, and it drove them crazy. But we are now talking about presidential politics. This isn't about a Democratic political machine out of San Francisco being put on trial in a courtroom. This is a presidential campaign. This is about cherry-picking half-truths to make Harris or Doug Emhoff her husband or Willie Brown, maybe her old boyfriend. It's about making them look incredibly dirty and in turn making her look incredibly corrupt. This election should be about abortion, climate change, income inequality, climate change, democracy, unions, climate change, abortion, and free, not affordable, free health care. This election should be about climate change, abortion, and free tuition at all public universities. This election should be about affordable rent. It won't be. because the same media that just dragged Joe Biden through artificial muck is going to assist Donald Trump in dragging Harris through fresh synthetic grime, made up horse crap. Donald Trump will find something. I'm sorry. Invent something. He will invent something. Something about the husband, Doug Emhoff. Something about Willie Brown. Trump will go after the husband and will portray Willie Brown as the old boyfriend. They will make up something corrupt and salacious, and then Jake Tapper and Dana Bash, who insist over at CNN we would give anything to just report on the issues that Americans care most about. We wish we were talking about abortion, guns, and climate change, Ukraine and Gaza, but our hands are tied. We have to talk about these accusations against Kamala Harris because we don't know if some of it could be true. Dana Bash, Jake Tapper, CNN will take the easy way out, as they always do, and allow Donald Trump to control the news cycle. And Harris, you know how this is going to play out. She will be forced and told, you need to get your arms around this fictitious scandal. And by doing so, she will dignify it. She will give these lies more oxygen. And come late October, mark my words, this presidential election will be about, and only about, who is more corrupt, Harris or Trump. Because our media and the Democratic Party is not equipped to run a presidential campaign on the issues. They can only run, the Democrats can only run a campaign that says Trump, fascist, totalitarian, criminal, which he is. But this election would be a landslide if this Democratic Party was equipped to talk about the issues that actually concern American voters. But this Democratic Party, as we saw yesterday, answers to the donor class. They don't want this to be about issues. They want drama, fear, terror, Trump bad, threat to democracy, which he is. But you want to save a democratic republic? You give voters Medicare for all, free tuition at all public universities, codify Roe, tackle climate change, get rid of the guns. Something like 90% of Americans want universal background checks. Granted, Biden has tried to do a lot of this. The Republicans block him. I mean, I'm angry at the Democrats this morning, but the Republicans are exponentially worse. South Carolina, House Democrat James Clyburn, who up until 2023 played a major role in the Democratic House leadership, endorsed Harris for president Sunday, pretty much saying, if Joe Biden wants her, so do I. The New York Times reports this morning that there is a wing inside the Democratic Party, like me, furious that Joe Biden was forced to step down. I'm incensed. My sister cried earlier today. Now, that Joe Biden, that pro-Biden wing that's really angry, is partly composed of black women who believe any choice to replace Biden other than Harris is unacceptable. And we always knew that. She's going to be the nominee. You cannot replace, it is hers. You cannot replace her with anybody else. After Joe stepped aside, Jasmine Crockett, the Texas House Democrat, put out this message, quote, "Well, I hope the geniuses that push the most consequential president of our lifetime out have a plan. Joe wasn't the problem, Dems were. I know one thing, I will only work for Kamala Harris. If it's anyone other than Vice President Harris, enjoy campaign season. I hope all of my disenchanted colleagues are able to find some walking shoes and get to work because I will not." George Soros and his son Alex Soros, by the way, Alex is going to marry Huma Abedin, who was Hillary's chief advisor. She was married to Congressman Weiner. Remember Congressman Weiner? Well, George Soros' son is going to marry Huma Abedin. They immediately endorsed Vice President Harris. So did LinkedIn co-founder Reid Hoffman. Reed Hastings, the chairman of Netflix, who donated $3 million to the Democratic Party's campaign to win back the House this year, was one of the key donors who pushed for Biden to be off the ticket. And according to the Financial Times this morning, instead of endorsing Harris, Reed Hastings over at Netflix is now demanding Democrats need a nominee who can win one of the swing states. Harris has many advantages going into the convention. Because Biden has officially endorsed her, his entire campaign apparatus is now turned over to her. Biden's campaign manager, Jen O'Malley Dillon, told staffers yesterday, as of now, we work for Harris. Whether Harris cleans house remains to be seen. I would be surprised if Jen O'Malley Dillon lasts the summer as Harris's campaign manager. The Associated Press reports Biden's decision to step aside was coordinated with Harris. She was in on it. He told her that he was stepping aside early Sunday morning, hours before the announcement. Immediately after President Biden's announcement, Speaker Mike Johnson said, if Joe Biden is unfit to run for re-election, he should resign the presidency immediately. Now, my listeners know that in the lead up to Joe Biden stepping aside, I said if Joe Biden quits the race, he should resign the presidency and have Kamala run as the incumbent. The only recent historical precedent that I can think of is Gerald Ford, who became president after Nixon resigned. Ford went on to lose re-election 2 years later. I have since changed my mind. When I said Biden should resign if he steps away from the ticket, I said it honestly not believing that Biden would ever step aside. I did not think there were that many backstabbers. I never believed the donor class would turn on him so viciously. So this morning, I'm caught flat-footed. And I am presented with a brand new reality. And I don't think Biden stepping down as president is the smartest move. I think at the time I said it, it felt like a good idea. I don't think so. House Majority Leader Steve Scalise and Elise Stefanik, who with Mike Johnson make up the Republican leadership in the House. That would be Steve Scalise and Elise Stefanik. Scalise and Elise. Elise and Scalise. And if I were a Republican, I could help them design a button. I'm going to wrap it up. Still angry. I thought I'd be in a better mood once I did the show. I'm still angry. House Majority Leader Steve Scalise and Elise Stefanik, who with Mike Johnson make up the Republican leadership in the House, they said Biden's decision to step aside has disenfranchised the 14 million Democrats who voted for him in the primaries. How about trying to overturn the election in 2020 and Donald Trump trying to disenfranchise the 80 million people who voted for Joe Biden? That's not a problem with you? They also accuse the Democrats of engaging in a massive cover-up regarding Joe Biden's mental and physical faculties. So starting this week, they're gonna start subpoenaing people from the White House to get to the bottom of Joe Biden's mental acuity. Welcome to the next 100 days. But the nominee for president is Kamala Harris. Like Joe Biden, she's not the best choice, but our only choice. Get to work for her. Fall in love and in line, whether you like it or not. This is what's being served. So, suck it up. This is the way it turned out. She has to win. Find a way to fall in love. All right? I'm David Feldman, reminding you to stay strong and protect the weak. Get to work for the Democratic Party. Get to work. All right? If you would like a transcript of today's garbage, go to shopdavidfeldman.com. All the transcripts are made possible, are free, because of my idiot listeners who went to the store and bought things like this, my Still a Democrat t-shirt, which I kind of like. So that's kind of nice. I designed that all by myself. Still a Democrat. Leonard, my nephew, didn't spell check the merchandise, so I've got a warehouse filled with David Ferdman Show hoodies, coffee mugs, and T-shirts. My nephew thought my last name was Ferdman, not Feldman. So if you want to help a brother out, go to shopdavidfeldman.com and buy a David Ferdman coffee mug, T-shirt, or hoodie, or you can get a Still a Democrat coffee mug. It'll look great. I love that. Or a Made in Los Estados Unidos coffee mug. This is the stuff I'm proud of. This is the stuff that makes me think I could be the next Gwyneth Paltrow or Martha Stewart and create a lifestyle brand. But some of you have bought the stuff that I can hold my head up high because of. But my biggest seller is what I ask you not to buy. And it is the chef's apron with the words, "Hope you're in the mood for diarrhea." I don't understand why you're doing this to me. My number one seller, chef's apron that reads, "Hope you're in the mood for diarrhea." Number two, the Trump fart filtration mask. And this really hurts. My son came up with this, and people are buying it just to hurt me. This is a coffee mug with Socrates saying, "Why do I pee out my penis but don't poo out my punis?" Socrates. And that's not a big seller, but it's selling just enough to make me paranoid and hate my listeners for buying that. Thank you to Bob in the chat room. I don't know if he's there. I don't know how many people were able to see today's show because we had some technical difficulties. Please share this so we get the word out. Okay. I think that covers everything. Yes, it does. Okay, subscribe to this channel and my newsletter and hit the like button. Okay, thank you. Bye. I'm still angry. Still very, very angry. Bye.